Have we finally found a video model that can nail dialogue so well that we don't need lip sync generators or motion capture anymore? Have we finally gotten past the uncanny valley that everybody's talking about? Well, in this video, I'm gonna take you behind the scenes of how I've been testing Kling 3.0 for dialogue, what's actually working, and how I'm building multi-shot dialogue scenes step by step. So if you're new here, I'm Khalil from AI for Real Life, and I've been building everything from AI music videos to dialogue-heavy micro dramas, regular AI dramas, cinematic trailers, and many other things for clients. And also in the background, I've been building my own long-form cinematic project that I've been building in front of you called The Life of the Lazy Mon. So all this isn't just theory, this is battle-tested inside of real projects. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so first I want to show you the full dialogue scene that I've been building. There's still quite a few things that I need to tighten up and fix, but I wanted to give you a real snapshot so you can feel what I've been talking about and working on before we break the whole thing down. All right, let's go ahead and check it out.
Well, look who it is.
What happened to you last night?
Don't start.
Bro, you look terrible. You might still be drunk.
I'm about to vomit on this bar. Where were you last night anyways?
I picked up a nice bag and played Halo till my thumbs went numb. I heard you come in at sunrise sounding like a rhino on meth.
Yeah. And I blew all my tips again.
That's the problem, bro. Low season's here. Same dead winters every year. We grind all summer just to scrape by when it gets cold.
Exactly. I'm sick of freezing my ass off in a wetsuit, pissing in my suit just to stay warm for these trash East Coast waves. Working nonstop just to exist. I say we just bail on Myrtle altogether. You're preaching to the choir, bro. Where are you trying to go? I heard about this place down south. Costa Rica, cheap living, beautiful chicas, real waves, pura vida type shit.
Costa Rica? Yeah, I could do that.
When? Let's go as soon as I sober up.
All right, so here's the deal. Honestly, dialogue is the final boss of AI filmmaking. We can get away with a lot with B-roll, we can get away with a lot with wide shots, we can even get away with weird artifacts with a little bit of crafty editing. But the second that you put a character in a close-up and they start talking, the audience decides immediately whether this is even worth watching anymore. It's the micro expressions, it's the blink timing, it's the shape that the mouth makes, all these little things. And that's where the whole uncanny valley lives. So I did what I do, and I decided to stress test Kling 3.0 Omni inside of a real project. I wanted to see if it could really pull off these micro emotions, the subtle realism, the sustained performance and consistency when it kind of actually matters, right? So here's a little bit of the story behind this whole thing. See, when Kling 3.0 dropped, it honestly changed what I thought was possible. I've always been a big fan of Kling, no secret there. And I actually gave my initial reaction and why I chose the Kling 3.0 Omni model over their 3.0 video model in my last video. So if you want to check that out, you can and hear about that whole process. But after that video, I dove back into one of my projects that I have been building out, and it's the Life of the Lazy Mon series. And I was doing this part of it as a micro drama format, and that was for a couple different reasons, actually. One is that, honestly, there's a micro drama explosion happening right now. And two, I'm building some of these for clients, so I wanted to understand the vertical short form dialogue driven format style at a deeper level. So that's what I was focused on. But the specific scene that I was working on at the time that I'm going to show you right here, it didn't have much dialogue. It was more visual with fast cuts that kind of told the whole story. And I realized that that's not really stress testing the strength of the dialogue scenes with this model. So I skipped ahead a bit in the episode and decided to build out one of the heavier dialogue scenes that happens a little later on in the story. I needed to know if it would hold up down the line or if I was eventually going to have to fall back to my older methods. And I also did a deep dive into tackling the whole dialogue with AI in one of my past videos. You can check that video out if you want to see what the best tools were for this whole process just a couple of months ago. So for this, the scene that I chose was actually kind of difficult one to pull off. It wasn't like really heavy drama, but this was more nuanced. It was more subtle, more like kind of bro stoner comedy energy. So in the past, the only way that I could really make that work was by acting it out myself or using lip sync tools. So like acting it with Kling 2.6 motion capture is great if you're a good actor, but I'm not. So that wasn't a real option for me. So this was a real test. Could Kling handle the subtle, conversational, slightly comedic dialogue without having me have to perform it manually in a tragic sort of manner like I was trying to do before? So that's what I wanted to find out. So I had two characters, bar, location, multi-angle coverage, and dialogue that actually carries subtle, nuanced weight. At least that's what I was going for. And here is the rule that I gave myself. No ElevenLabs, no separate lip sync model, no voice changes or anything like that. I just wanted to see what Kling 3.0 Omni could do on its own. And that was because I wanted to see if this could stand on its own or if I was going to need a hybrid approach moving forward. And one of the things that really blew me away with Kling 3.0 Omni was that level of control that it was giving us. And Omni really changed that dynamic. And the reason is because it lets us build elements. You can do character elements, scene elements, prop elements, voice elements, and I think that might be it. And once we realize what this actually means, it really shifts how we approach the whole process. See, at this point, we're not just typing a prompt and hoping that it stays consistent. We're setting up pre-production. We're doing our cast, we're defining our location, we're defining what must stay consistent. And I go over a lot of the processes that I use to set up a AI film project and all that in another video, and I've got guides and everything for that if you want to look into that. And that all helps with consistency, but having a model that's got a lot of these things baked in, that's really next level, in my opinion. And the thing is if you skip that step, you're going to burn credits and you're going to lose your mind trying to fix things later on after you've already made the generations. All right, so this part of the process is where we slow down and we actually set the foundation. So if we want consistency, we have to build it. So step one in this whole process, using Kling 3.0 Omni, is building our elements actually inside of Omni. So let's start with a character. When we create a character element, and for this, select the Omni model and not just the regular Kling 3.0 video model. So when we want to create a character element, we're not just uploading a cool image, we're actually giving the model an identity anchor. So we upload a primary image, ideally like a clean headshot where the face is clear and well lit. And then we add additional angles. You do a side profile, 3/4 angle, maybe a slightly different expression. And the model technically requires at least 2 images for you to put in here for you to even generate your character. But the more coverage we can give it, the more stable it becomes. And what we're doing right here is we're basically teaching it what this person looks like from multiple perspectives, so it doesn't have to guess later and drift and give you inconsistency with your character. So from here, we go ahead and name the element, whatever you want to name it. But now here's the part where it gets really powerful. You can also attach a voice. So if we've already built a voice in ElevenLabs or another tool, we can upload that audio file and bind it to the character. That way, when we generate dialogue, the model has a voice reference. And this is exactly one of the things that we're testing. Can we build in voice plus visual consistency to hold up without needing external lip sync? So after the character, we build the scene element, and it's the same concept. You get the primary scene image, which is our master location, and then you get alternate angles if you have them. The same process there. Now, when we generate, we're not hoping that it remembers the bar layout. We've already defined it. We've given it that data. And at this point, if there's a prop that absolutely must stay consistent, like a specific phone or a necklace or object, that actually becomes its own element also that you can build out in Kling as one of the elements. And to be honest with you, I didn't add the necklace element to the scene, which I actually paid for later, and it really kind of sucked. So what we're doing here is pre-production inside of the model. We're defining the cast, we're defining the set, we're defining what cannot drift. That's essentially what we're doing. And this is based on the mistakes that I make, and I still make them, even though I do this all the time. All right, so the next step here is where the real mindset shift happened for me. And I actually mentioned this in my previous video, and I said I wanted to explore this whole technique a little further. And that technique is the idea that I'm using Kling 3.0 Omni for coverage. And in my opinion, that might be one of its biggest strengths. Not just generating clips, not just animating the frames, but building on a scene or building a scene even. Because before this, the old method was jumping back and forth with Nano Banana Pro and trying to manually generate every single angle and then fighting drift and softness and all those things that would happen along the way. So instead, I use Omni's multi-shot generation to build coverage. And I'm loving this, to be honest with you. Let me show you what I mean. So I already had this bar scene built out months ago. And to be honest with you, this project has been evolving for a long time. So I already had this location locked in, the characters, and then I went ahead and locked the characters that I had and I had already built inside of Omni as elements. So the scene was locked as an element, and then the characters were locked as elements. So I took that master frame from the bar and both characters in position and used that as my starting point. So the goal of the first generation wasn't to get perfect dialogue. And actually I didn't prompt for dialogue at all. It was to get the next angle. So what I was hoping for was the camera to cut from this two shot of both characters and give me one character positioned on the right side of the frame in order to maintain the whole 180 rule, 180 degree rule, whatever it's called. So I needed that spatial consistency so the scene wouldn't feel confusing when we went back and forth between the characters during the conversation. So I prompted it very specifically for that. Shift the camera, focus on the character, keep him on the correct side of the frame, maintain the environment, all those kind of things baked into the prompt. And the generation gave me the shot that I was looking for. First run, I was super happy that this theory was actually working out. And then from there, here's the trick. What we do now is we extract that frame that we get from that multi-shot, and then we re-anchor it as a new starting frame when we get to the dialogue sequences later on. So for this, we're not just generating clips anymore, we're harvesting usable frames and building on top of them. And what I'm finding is that Kling does a really good job with this part. So when the characters and scenes and everything are properly locked in as elements, it can maintain consistency across the angle shifts better than what I was getting before, using the whole Nano Banana Pro, trying to map out my every angle of my scene. And then what I did was I repeated the process for the other character. I started with the master frame, prompt for the reverse angle. I generated some over the shoulders, generated reaction shots, different things like that, using the multi-shot prompting technique. And with this, sometimes it works first try like it did on my first one. But honestly, just like any other model, you're gonna have to do multiple generations. But when it hits, when you get that clean over the shoulder shot with a consistent character, consistent lighting, consistent layout, and you didn't have to fight with Nano Banana Pro for 45 minutes to get it, it's a good feeling. And honestly, it's becoming a huge time saver, for me at least. So what used to take me hours of manual angle generation and soft image cleanup and all these kind of things can now be built in layers, almost like stacking blocks or whatever. And that right there, just that part of my workflow alone is a huge shift. But I'm gonna be 100% honest, it's a lot better, but it's not magic. So I went through a lot of generations. Some worked, some didn't. Some added random shirtless dude walking in the background, and that just kind of reiterated something important, which is that certain elements have to stay baked into your prompts every single time. Things like no background character, no music, consistent room tone, no additional props, different things like that that really lock it in so you're not getting these extra details that you didn't ask for. So using a prompt template is really powerful. I do try to use one, but even with a template, sometimes these things get dropped or slightly modified. So these are little things that we have to take note of. For example, I made a mistake. I didn't add the necklace as its own prop element in the scene. And some of the reference images that I was using for this were from months ago, before I had finalized that detail. And I built the character with the character post sheet. He had necklaces and whatever. So in some of the generations he's wearing it, and others he's not. Like the starting frame was without it, then some of the ones that it generated using my character that I baked in as an element has it on. Now, all that ends up becoming a cleanup problem. And that means that I either regenerate those shots, fix it in post, or rebuild the character element correctly from the start, which may be what I have to do here. And sometimes those small details give the character personality, right? But we have to decide whether that extra detail is worth the continuity headache when we're building multi-shot scenes like this. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the acting. See, this is the first time that I've seen a model generate dialogue that actually starts to feel nuanced. Small smirks, eye shifts, micro head tilts, subtle pauses before a line, all these little things. Before, most of the time they felt robotic. But now some of these scenes, it really starts to nail it. but it's not perfect every time. Sometimes the cadence is slightly off. Sometimes it doesn't quite hit certain words correctly. Sometimes the rhythm feels just a half second too fast or too slow. All these things, they still happen. And what I'm noticing is if you push the generations longer, you can still get that drift. So these are some of the things that they still have to iron out and that we need to test some more. But that's why really instead of chasing like the 15-second perfect generation, because it can generate 15 seconds, I focus on shorter usable segments, like 6 seconds, 8 seconds, and I just kind of leave it at that. But honestly, when it hits, it really hits. And those moments are the first time I've genuinely thought, okay, we might be actually crossing a line here. And just as a quick reminder, with this model, if you don't explicitly prompt for dialogue, you're most likely going to get gibberish, just nonsense words, stuff that makes your generation unusable. So every time that we're building a dialogue scene, we need to clearly prompt for spoken dialogue or facial expressions or acting beats. It's a small note, but it'll save you a lot of wasted generations as you move forward with this whole thing. All right, let's just talk money really quick because that's a question that everybody has. I actually put together a little starter guide that breaks down generation costs and credits and all that kind of stuff, and you can check that out if you want the numbers. But for this personal project, I've been experimenting, and I'm honestly still on the fence about this part of the workflow, so you let me know what you think in the comments. But what I've been doing is running most of my generations at 720p, and it's mainly to save money. And honestly, the 720p, they still look good. And no, a lot of people are probably cringing right now, but that's what I feel about it. But so what I'm doing is when these shots, they actually become keepers, I run those through Topaz for upscaling. So instead of using every one at 1080p, I'm waiting to find the ones that I'm actually going to use, and I upscale those. So now it becomes a cost versus benefit sort of question. Am I spending more money on Topaz, on my Topaz subscription, than I would if I just generated everything at 1080p and ate the wasted credits? But before we get into the whole uncanny valley verdict, I want to quickly walk you through how I actually build these dialogue scenes step by step, because I said I would. First, I built out the elements, character, scene, any props that needed to exist. And once those were locked in, I started with a master frame of the location and then began building prompts for coverage, just like we talked about. But here's something important. The prompting technique with Omni is different than how I've used other models. See, normally with most models, we avoid using character names in the prompts because the model doesn't know who that is. So we describe them instead. But with Omni, that's actually the opposite. We want the names, and here's why. Because once the character elements are created, we can tag them directly in the prompt. So I'll write the prompt normally, or I have ChatGPT help me out with the prompt based on my prompt templates, describing the action, the camera, all those kind of things. Then I'll go back through, and every time a character name appears, I tag it using the element reference. So same with the scene. If it talks about the living room, then I tag that living room at that part of the prompt. And that tagging is the control layer. See, that's the difference. So the process looks like this. Build characters and scene elements. You build the prompt, tag all relevant elements, generate coverage angles, extract usable frames, and upload those frames, and then use those higher resolution stills as starting frames for the actual dialogue beats. At least that's what I've been doing, and it's been working out pretty well for me. And now instead of trying to generate a full multi-shot sequence with perfect dialogue in one pass, I'm focusing on one acting beat at a time. So close up, line delivery, reaction shot, things like that. And if I need a new angle, then I go back to the multi-shot generation, build that angle, extract it, anchor it, and return to the whole dialogue thing. And I've noticed that you can get one cut and it seems to be a lot more consistent. But if you go to 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or however many shots, it kind of gets pretty funky. And honestly, it seems very similar to how real directors shoot coverage. From what I understand, when they go into that tight close-up, that's where the acting really has to land. So that's just how I treat this process. I build the coverage first, and then I focus on performance. So does this solve the whole uncanny valley thing? I'm not sure it's 100% there yet. And honestly, you're going to be the judge of that. When you watch these scenes, do they pass that test for you? Do they feel natural enough so your brain stops questioning it? That's the real metric. Now, does this completely eliminate the need for lip sync tools like HeyGen or using other older motion capture workflows like Kling 2.0? I'm not 100% sure. But I will say that I really like where this is right now. The fact that we can generate nuanced dialogue, maintain character consistency, and get usable acting beats without immediately reaching for a separate lip sync tool, it's a really big shift. And it might not replace everything quite yet, I'm not sure, but it's getting close enough that we can start to rethink when and why we're reaching for these other tools. So this scene would have taken me weeks or a month to build with the older workflows, but this took a couple of days, and that's the breakthrough. It's not that it's perfect, but it's that speed plus control. And honestly, there's been a ton of hype around this new CDance model that's coming out, and I've had a couple of early access invites to test it out and hype it up, but I haven't really dove in yet because I genuinely wanted to understand this model first. But if CDance delivers the same level of control and consistency, plus even stronger nuanced dialogue and acting, then we're done here. And that's not even mentioning whatever Google drops their next model. You know they're not just sitting back and watching this happen. So if speed plus control becomes a standard across multiple platforms, then things are about to get very, very interesting. All right, so I want to know what you think. Are we finally getting out of that uncanny valley for dialogue that everybody's been talking about? Or are we not quite there yet? Go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comments. And I'm going to go ahead and dive back in and keep working on this and a few other projects. And I'll keep you posted on what's actually holding up in real workflows. And I'm keeping an eye on CDance. There's been a lot of big promises and a lot of hype around that model. And I don't know yet whether it's going to live up to that hype, but if it delivers this level of control and nuanced dialogue, it could potentially replace this model or maybe supplement it. I don't know yet. Either way, if that model holds up, that's when things get really interesting. So as soon as I carve out time to properly test it, work it into my workflow and see if it actually stands up under pressure, I'll let you know. And if you want guides on how to build scenes like this and projects like this and how to structure your prompts or how to start your own AI filmmaking projects, check them out in the description. I've got links to some guides down there, and I'm working on more detailed courses that should be coming soon. And if you made it this far, go ahead and do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. That really helps me out a lot, and it lets me focus more time on building better content and really pushing these projects further instead of chasing other things. All right, so we'll see you in the next one.